From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's what's ahead. K-State's Cassie Jones will tell of her assignment last week in China, where she instructed scientists and livestock interests there about curbing the spread of African swine fever. She talks about the severity of that problem yet in China and why the U.S. hog industry must remain vigilant against ASF entering this country. Then K-State's Robin Reid and Mykel Taylor will talk about the series of Farm Bill meetings for you producers that K-State will host over the next 2 weeks at 10 sites around Kansas. And K-State's Charlie Lee will cover a new study that looked at the spread of mountain lion populations in the central U.S. All that and more coming your way next on this Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome to our Tuesday edition of Agriculture Today. And to get things rolling, a report on a special trip that was made by our guest. She is fresh back from the People's Republic of China, where she shared information that hopefully will help that country address its battle with African swine fever. Cassie Jones is with us from the Animal Sciences and Industry Department here at K-State, where she is a livestock feed scientist. This was a unique assignment, you'd have to say. Cassie, tell us about it.
That's right. I went to China. This was my first trip and really had 2 main goals. One was that I was teaching a 5-day course to entities within the country that manufacture animal food and then export it to the United States. And so that was one important part of the trip. And the other part was certainly trying to understand African swine fever virus within the country, what they're doing and what their current battles are, and to share some of our research with them in hopes that it will help them as they struggle to control the disease.
Where did you go and with whom did you meet initially?
Yeah, I spent most of my time in Beijing. I had a couple of trips outside of the city, but for the most part, we were based out of the China Agricultural University. They're really the leaders on making recommendations on what to do and how to control ASF within the country, and with other industry entities who had come in for some presentations that I gave while I was there.
Well, just to lend some specifics, what sort of information were you conveying to those various audiences then?
I've been fortunate to be a member of one of the teams of researchers here at K-State working with African swine fever virus. And so we had recently published an article with Megan Niederwerder and others in the vet school on the infectious dose of African swine fever virus in feed and in water. And so my specific role was to help them understand how both water and especially feed or ingredients could spread the disease if they had become contaminated.
And was there a great need for that knowledge as you observed what was going on there?
Absolutely. It's a really interesting situation, and we can talk a little bit more about their specific dynamics right now. But as the country of China has about 50% or about half of the world's pork population, we see now that they're starting to report numbers that their sow herd has been culled to about 2/3 of what it originally was. So they've lost about 1/3 of their sows, and the conversations we were having were no longer really even how to control the disease, but instead it had shifted to if they should control the disease or if they should allow it to become endemic.
That's an interesting spin that nobody's talking about here. So the thought is to depopulate in effect and start over at some point?
Well, there's really 2 main trains of thought in disease interactions and disease management. And the first, which is what we in the United States very much continue to maintain, would be our role with ASF is very swift and rapid depopulation. That if it ever were to arrive, even within North America, it would be depopulation of the affected sites and all sites within a specific perimeter around those, and then eventual repopulation if the disease allows. What we've seen within the country of China is that they've had so much disease. I mean, we're talking about a disease that leads to about 90% of death loss, but they have so many affected farms, and their system is not set up very well to control things like biosecurity, that instead of depopulation, which has thus far not been very capable of controlling the disease within the country, they're considering just living with it. And the 10% of pigs that remain after being affected with the disease, if they should start breeding those animals together and hope that over time they can have a resistant population to the disease altogether.
So aim for natural resistance to form, let things take their course in effect.
That's correct, and it's really what China's approach has been to many infectious diseases, even on the swine side. As we look at the other major swine viruses like PRRS and PEDV, they've also struggled to control those within the swine population and have allowed them to become endemic within their pork population. It's also really what's prevented them from having the same production ability that we have within the United States. While they have greater numbers, we're certainly a much more efficient production within our country. And so some of our conversations were how to do that and if possible, and then having conversations with those companies that have tried to do that and continue to see rebreaks among the populations, and they're really struggling to manage that. And so while I think that it's their idea initially, I think they're starting to recognize that maybe that's not going to be very effective in a disease like African swine fever virus where mortality is just so high.
So what this would say is that the community worldwide, the swine community, needs to remain quite vigilant, obviously including the United States, if there is a continued presence of African swine fever until it runs its course.
Absolutely. And you really see two very different types of production systems within the country. Within China, you have the production systems that are still in business and have clean sow herds and clean herds that have very, very high levels of biosecurity in and out of their farms. And then you have the extreme other side where they're allowing pigs to become infected with African swine fever virus, which just goes forward to continue to spread the disease throughout the country. And so as we continue to see that dynamic play out, it will be interesting to see which of those two dynamics wins and if we can continue to keep some of those herds negative within the country.
Again, though, your specialty is in feedstuffs, and it's back to feedstuffs exiting China, coming to the U.S. that really has your direct attention, right?
That's correct. As we think about what can we do domestically, certainly better understanding the disease and its dynamics is key to that. But really there are kind of three main things that I want us to think about from the United States perspective. First and foremost, if we have anybody traveling back and forth to the country, whether they see pigs in affected populations or not, it's very important to be diligent about safety and biosecurity of our own selves back and forth. For example, going to and from the airport alone, even if you weren't in contact with pigs, could lead to accumulation of fecal material on the bottom of your shoes that might be infected. And certainly we can't have any smuggling of pork products from China or any other ASF endemic country. And so that's the first thing, is if we have people going to or from the People's Republic of China or really any other country that's infected with this devastating disease, making sure that we declare those items and that we're safe about how we move about and into our own borders. Secondly, I think it's important that we not only maintain but even increase the biosecurity that we have both on farms and at our feed mills. African swine fever virus has an incubation period of 4 to 19 days. And so as you think about how often we move from one site to another and how many times we move back and forth from one feed mill to another farm, with the feed mill being the main location where we have farm cross traffic, the number of times that can happen over a 2-week period of time can really spread this disease before we even diagnose that it's within the United States. And then finally, making sure that we don't use high-risk ingredients. We've demonstrated through research at K-State and with some of our collaborators that African swine fever virus can survive in ingredients that we bring in from ASF endemic countries like China, like Romania. And so it's important that any of those high-risk ingredients like organic soybean meal or other ingredients that we reduce their use or prevent their use altogether.
And that latter point, we tend to forget that, yes, China is the epicenter for ASF, but it's not restricted to that country now, unfortunately. So vigilance has to be fairly widespread here.
That's correct. There are really two main areas where we see ASF exploding. We have kind of a slow spread through Eastern Europe that's really being spread through the wild boar population. And then we have just this explosion of virus that's occurring within Southeast Asia, where we have not only China, but also now Laos, North Korea, Vietnam, Myanmar, Hong Kong, and even just this morning, the Philippines are starting to investigate a higher level of mortality that they've started to see within their pig population. And so hopefully that ends up just being an investigation, but certainly it's one that we need to keep our eyes on as they're one of our major trading partners as well.
Well, Cassie, before you went to China, you knew the importance of African swine fever and contending with it, but it sounds like that's galvanized now, and that it's going to be a formidable challenge for some time.
It certainly will, and it's something that, while pork itself is safe to eat for humans, and the disease does not spread to any of the other species, certainly its effect within swine and within the pork population, we see its ramifications throughout the rest of agriculture. So, for example, we know that Iowa State has estimated that the 30% reduction in the Chinese swine supply that we see is expected to drop soybean meal prices by 3 to 5%. That's something that we really can't manage right now. Right. We certainly see that as we export about 25% of our pork product, although we may not have tons of it being exported right now because of tariffs, it certainly will put pressure on the other protein segments. And so even though this is a very much a swine and a pig-related issue, it does have pretty major ramifications across the other grains, across the other competing meats, and across the agriculture climate in general.
Well, you returned to us with some very important perspectives on the problem. We appreciate you coming by today, passing along what you discovered upon your trip there recently, and hopefully we will be able to keep up a good fight against this disease. Cassie.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming over once again. Cassie Jones there, livestock feed scientist here at Kansas State University, having just returned from a week in the People's Republic of China, talking African swine fever mitigation with livestock and feed producers there. We'll be back with more. This is Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today is back now, bringing to the attention of you producers important meetings coming up all throughout the state of Kansas in the coming couple of weeks. These are K-State's 2018 Farm Bill meetings, and they're designed to help you get the process rolling eventually here on your enrollment in the commodity programs out of the USDA. And joining us, two of those who are certainly responsible for conducting these, agricultural economists, K-State Research and Extension, Mykel Taylor and Robin Reid. The gist of the discussions revolves around, Robin, the decision-making that will be forthcoming for producers in the coming months.
Yeah, so September 3rd, producers can start making the decision between the ARC or the PLC program that they want to sign up for. And this will be for commodity years 2019 and 2020. So the crop that's in the ground now that will be harvested, or the wheat that has already been harvested this year, will fall under these programs that are elected, and then the crop that's harvested next year.
This is not the same as the first go-round with ARC and PLC specifically, though, Mykel, and that's part of the importance of these particular workshops.
Right. We've had this Farm Bill is a reworking of the 2014 Farm Bill, so we're familiar with the ARC and PLC programs. But there's some details that have changed, and it's worth noting those. So we're going to talk about some of the changes in the program, and then we'll talk about the expected prices and where yields need to be in order for different outcomes to make sense economically for which program that you would want to pick.
Folks like to speak in generalities, but the fact of the matter is there are so many dynamics involved. Individuals are going to have to sort this out on a piece-by-piece basis, aren't they?
Absolutely. It depends on what crop-based mix that you have, what county you're in. A big change this time around was the switch in the data source from the ARC County program, now using RMA or crop insurance data to look at those county yields versus the National Ag Statistics Service surveys that were done in the past. So it's an entire new benchmark for each county, and that's going to make for a different decision-making process in the past as far as what the benchmark might offer a producer.
So, Mykel, about these meetings themselves and what you and Robin and others out of your department have lined up, there are 10 of these, no less, around the state of Kansas. But what is the format, in essence?
We're going to discuss the programs in general terms, and then we'll get into some specific details, talking a little bit about, how the programs turned out for our counties last time around and what we can look forward to in the coming years. We'll get some specifics on SCO, which is the supplemental coverage option offered underneath PLC. And we'll also get into some specifics where we show people how to use a tool that we've put together with Oklahoma State that will allow people to put in their specific farms information and kick out estimates of which program would be more appropriate for their farmer.
That tool is a centerpiece of all of this. What all is involved in that, Robin, in general, what it can do for a producer?
Well, this tool was developed with the 2014 Farm Bill when we had to make a 5-year irrevocable decision. So obviously there was a lot of things that needed to be thought about when you're looking 5 years out. Now that it's a 2-year decision initially and then a year-to-year decision after that, it's a little easier when you're thinking about making that decision, but you still want to look at different scenarios of what prices and yields might be and how that would affect which program is best for the farm. And as I mentioned earlier, it really comes down to what type of base acres the farm has as well. So the tool gives the producer a way to individually look at their farm and say, this is maybe the best program for my operation, not just looking at the county level or, what the neighboring farms think is best for their operations. It's really customizable to the farmer's own situation.
And Mykel, you and Robin will be walking producers through how to make the most of that tool, right?
Right. We're going to talk about all the different assumptions that can be made and the different sources of data that they can bring in to use to figure out their situation. And we're also, we've been working with county agents, and they're trained on the tool, and so they will be an important point of contact for producers in their local counties to be able to get some help as well.
And there will be, at each of these, panel discussions, and several principals involved in this process will be on hand to bring up scenarios that might apply to producers.
Yeah, so when we look at these programs, there's really, we talk about ARC and PLC, which is Farm Service Agency, but it also ties into RMA through the supplemental coverage option, through some provisions that NRCS is actually involved in when we're looking at conservation compliance and conservation stewardship program. There's a provision now that if you didn't plant your base acres in a period of time, you actually don't get payments through the ARC PLC anymore, but you are eligible through the CSP program to receive a payment. So because all 3 agencies are intertwined in this decision, they're going to be all brought together at a panel on the end of the program where they'll have a few minutes to speak and then take questions from the audience.
Very well. And what do the two of you hope that producers will take away from these meetings after they've had a chance to absorb what you and your colleagues will be presenting, as well as those panel discussions?
Our hope is that they walk away with a good baseline understanding of the program, and good references for the different resources that we put out on Ag Manager, because we will keep in touch with producers over the course of this entire sign-up period. And as we learn new information, put out bulletins or have webinars or make other resources available to them. So it's just our hope that they stay in contact with us as we go forward in this decision-making process.
Now, there are 10 of these, once again, well distributed throughout the state, but they're the same program at each site, are they not?
Absolutely. So anybody's welcome to attend any site. The information will be the same. We will have a little specific local information in there, but it's nothing that you can't go on Ag Manager and look up for any county in Kansas.
And is pre-registration required or walk in at the door?
We absolutely prefer that people pre-register so we know we have enough seats, but don't let that deter you for coming to a meeting anyways.
And we will give the list of the cities and the dates at which these will take place. You can go to agmanager.info. They have a full roster of these meetings. They're available for you to take a look at, as well as how to pre-register. But these are highly important. And Mykel, in closing, producers need to have a grasp of what's coming down the pipe as far as their participation and how they can maximize their position in that program.
Absolutely. The financial position of a lot of farmers these days is a lot tighter than it was the last time around that we did this farm bill. And so these program payments are going to be just that much more important. So we really want people to understand the decision and make the best decision that they can for their operation.
And this is a great way to sharpen your understanding of your options under the 2018 Farm Bill, producers. These are coming up quite soon. We'll give you the lineup in just a moment. Just as a quick footnote, Mykel, similar topic will be addressed at the Risk and Profit Conference coming up later this week. So those intending on attending that event will hear about a great lot of this as well, right?
Yes, we will be covering the Farm Bill topic at Risk and Profit in quite a bit of detail, as much as we can get into in the 2-hour slot that they've given us. And so it'll be another opportunity if you can't make it to one of the Farm Bill meetings.
Thanks to the both of you, and the best of luck with these meetings coming up soon.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Robin Reid and Mykel Taylor are agricultural economists with K-State Research and Extension. Now, here is the rundown of where these K-State Farm Bill informational meetings will take place. Next Monday, August 26th at Hill City, the morning of Tuesday the 27th in Goodland, then the afternoon of Tuesday the 27th in Leota, Wednesday, August 28th at Plains, Thursday the 29th in Great Bend, and then Friday the 30th of August in Wichita. Then after the Labor Day holiday, Tuesday the 3rd of September, Parsons, Wednesday, September the 4th, Ottawa, Thursday, September 5th in Seneca, and the last of these 10 meetings will take place in Concordia the week after that on Tuesday, September the 10th. Once more, go to agmanager.info, which has even more information on those dates and locations. But again, do register in advance. You can do so online right there at agmanager.info. In the interim, ahead of attending one of those meetings, there are a couple of more Farm Bill-related resources at that website you might want to look into. One is a spreadsheet that allows a producer to compare payments from the ARC County program versus the PLC program for the 5 years of the 2014 Farm Bill in each county. And the other is a spreadsheet that shows Kansas counties with separate irrigated and non-irrigated designations for program purposes by crop. Again, county by county. And there's considerable detailed information there as well on the dairy margin coverage program. That's part of the makeup of the Farm Bill. All of that under the 2018 Farm Bill section at agmanager.info. And you're tuned to Agriculture Today. We'll stand aside now for these next few minutes. When we come back, today's agricultural news headlines, K-State's Mike Brook checking in with this week's edition of Milk Lines, and K-State's Charlie Lee with the weekly wildlife management segment. Still ahead on the K-State Radio Network.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today, here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. Well, here's an update on Kansas crop conditions provided by the USDA. And for the week ending this past Sunday, the topsoil moisture supplies in the state, according to the department, 9% surplus, 67% adequate, and 24% short to very short. Subsoil moisture at 6% surplus, 71% adequate, 23% short to very short. The condition of the Kansas corn crop this week, 51% good to excellent, 34% fair, 15% poor to very poor. Corn in the dough stage, now at 72%. The average is 82%. In the dent, at 37%, the average near 41%. Soybean crop condition, 48% good to excellent, 40% fair, 12% poor to very poor. Soybeans blooming at 84% now and setting pods at 60%, both behind the average. And the condition of the grain sorghum crop then is at 60% good to excellent, 30% fair, and 10% poor to very poor. Sorghum headed now at 66%. That's behind the 78% average. And sorghum turning color now at 11% behind the 18% average for the date, according to the USDA's weekly crop condition update for Kansas. This is the week for crop field days put on by Kansas State University around the state, one of which is taking place this evening. 2 others are set for tomorrow. We'll tell you about those. K-State's North Central Experiment Field, a fall field day, is this evening starting at 6 o'clock. That'll be at the South Unit Field, located 2.5 miles west of Scandia along U.S. Highway 36. This is a free event, as are the other field days. On that program tonight, corn planting date considerations, in furrow fertilizer with soybeans and soybean stand issues, and long-term fertility research and trends will be covered at the North Central Experiment Field Fall Field Day. That is coming up this evening at the field just to the west of Scandia along U.S. Highway 36. K-State's East Central Kansas Experiment Field then hosting its Fall Field Day tomorrow, and that'll start at 9 o'clock in the morning with registration. There will be a complimentary lunch served at noon to conclude the event. Covered there, dicamba injury to non-extend soybeans, the effective split late-in applications on corn yield, and cover crop management for weed suppression will be discussed, along with looking at making the most of the Mesonet weather service out of K-State. That's at the East Central Kansas Experiment Field, the Fall Field Day just south of Ottawa, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. Lastly, K-State's Agricultural Research Center at Hayes is hosting its Fall Field Day tomorrow, and that'll start at 8:30 in the morning until 2 o'clock with lunch provided. A number of topics to be covered during those tours, including grain sorghum hybrid performance, occasional tillage, and wheat sorghum fallow, and more at K-State's Agricultural Research Center at Hayes. It's Fall Field Day coming up tomorrow. Now it's on to this week's edition of Milk Lines. Here's K-State dairy specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I went to visit with our Kansas dairy farmers concerning pricing corn silage. As we move into fall harvest time, some of you are starting to ask questions about how do we price corn silage this year. Well, it's going to be a very difficult thing, as a matter of fact, as we look at the volatility that we're currently seeing in the grain markets. You know, most of the time we do price corn silage somewhat based off of the value of corn grain. And with the volatility we currently have in the market, that's going to make some pricing issues fairly difficult as we try to move forward. So here are some thoughts that you might want to use as you try to negotiate a price for corn silage that's fair for both the dairy farm and also fair for the grain producer that might be selling you a crop for your corn silage supply. So as we think about pricing, there's a couple of different things that people have done over the years that seem to work all right. We know we harvest corn silage here in either August or September, so pricing corn at that time is usually the low point of the market. So in the past, we've sometimes offered the opportunity for the grain producer to price that corn silage, or price the price of the corn used to calculate the price of the corn silage based on a day in, say, October, November, or December. They have to pick the date on the date they can't go backwards in the calendar to try to pick out a date, but inform you as to which day they're planning on pricing the corn based on the price of corn that day. So once you establish how you're going to actually put a price on the grain portion, now we have to determine what kind of multiplier factor we're going to use. And again, in the past, we've used factors of anywhere from 7 to 9. Once in a while, you'll see maybe something as high as 10. But if we're buying the corn in the field and we're paying the harvest cost on it, i.e. the dairy farmer, we need to think probably closer to that multiplier of 7 rather than 9. 9 would include some harvest cost and some trucking with that. And most of the time we're actually buying this straight out of the field. Dairy farmers paying for the cost of the harvest and the storage. So as a dairy farmer, some of the things you need to think about is you do have harvest cost, you have the hauling cost. If you're putting it into a pile or you're putting it into a bag or maybe even into a bunker silo, you've got some packing cost and bagging costs there that you need to take into account. Most of all, you also have some storage loss. And very typically, probably we should estimate that we'll lose 8 to 10% of whatever we haul into the silage structure, and that will be due to fermentation loss. If we do not cover and we do not do a very good job of packing the silage into the silo, then we could see storage losses that are higher than that. But very typically, 8 to 10% loss of dry matter would be expected as we compare what we actually bring out to feed the animals versus what we put in the fall when we did the harvesting. So as you work through this with your potential partners on corn silage pricing, make sure that you choose a price that's fair for you, but is also fair for the grain producer as well. I know this year there'll be probably some questions about what do we do about corn silage that does not have as much grain in it as normal. One of the things I'd encourage you to do is make sure that you get a yield estimate for the grain and then sit down and really calculate how much good feed you'll actually be getting out of that. Keeping in mind that if we have a loss in grain, we probably aren't going to have as much starch in that, and it's not going to be as high a value to our dairy cattle. The other thing to keep in mind as you look at these potential fields is that if they are very uneven or if they've been damaged by wind, we may see a loss of actual yield in terms of tonnage as well. So the amount of silage that you're able to harvest off of that field may be less than what you might expect due to the damage that we've seen from wind and other issues this fall. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to calculate carefully when they're pricing corn silage.
Thanks, Mike, and you're listening to Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Agriculture Today continues now, and Mike's side once again, wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee, for his weekly visit. Charlie, you're going to bring to our attention today a recent study of mountain lions and how their range has expanded and what might be at the root of that. But this has been a topic widely discussed for some time now.
Yes, the cougar, the mountain lion, the puma, all common names for the same animal, has been the subject of lots of discussions, and I suspect will always be subject to a lot of discussions. This large cat has one of the largest ranges in the world. They were formerly distributed from South America all the way up to the Yukon. The cougar preys primarily on deer. They were hunted to near extirpation in many states, and a combination of habitat change, prey reduction, large predator control programs resulted in the elimination of the cougar from most of the East and most of the Midwest. and it's restricted their distribution in other areas as well. But cougar populations are now expanding from the largely undeveloped, rugged, mountainous area in the west into more human-dominated landscapes, like what's found in the agricultural landscapes of the Midwest. Consequently, there's lots of people that are reporting sightings of cougars. We've had lots of sightings in Kansas. There's always been a discussion about these sightings and whether they're actual real events and how do we document them as a scientific fact.
What's the track record on confirmation here in Kansas?
Well, I'm not sure we have an official confirmation record. My confirmations tally is at 20 individuals. I use the presence of a body as one factor that would be a confirmation, a photo that has been verified as to location, DNA, or in one other case, I accepted the evidence of a clear track that had been documented as to location. Those would be what constitutes a confirmation of a cougar sighting in my tally book. Others have different factors that could be considered as a confirmation, but I think I agree with the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism in most of these confirmations.
But as far as their broader distribution, where are they increasing the most geographically?
Well, through the Midwest. We see individual sightings now of cougars all the way to the East Coast that we've DNA'd back to their source populations. Some of those DNA-sourced individuals appear to be coming from the Black Hills in South Dakota and Wyoming. And that's an area that's been considered to be naturally recolonized by cougars during the 1900s after the state protected the species and then the state managed for increases in cougar prey during that time frame. So at some point they thought the Black Hills populations was kind of a semi-isolated population and that occasionally immigration would occur from cougar populations further west into Montana, Wyoming, along the Rocky Mountain Range, even down into Colorado and New Mexico.
There was thought then that if cougars could be controlled to some degree in the Black Hills region, that might pull down the spread of the cougar in other areas. That was the core of a new study, you say?
Yes, that was the hypothesis behind a study that was recently reported in the Journal of Wildlife Management. What was the impact of hunting that population of cougars in the Black Hills, and would it impact the eastward progression or spread of cougars? And after looking at information, those research authors decided that the pre-hunt, which was data that was collected from 1990 to 2004 on these confirmation locations that they deemed as pre-hunt, and where the number of confirmations and the percent of females in those confirmations post-hunt, which would have been 2005 to 2015. Actually, when they looked at the data, during the pre-hunt period, there were 25 carcasses that were dispersed randomly in the Midwest. But during the post-hunt period, they found nearly 4 times the number of carcasses in the Midwest, and the carcasses were significantly clustered. So that told me that perhaps when you look at that kind of information, hunting in the Black Hills did not slow the dispersal of cougars eastward, but perhaps it started to initiate some other semi-isolated populations. The clustering shows a population in northwestern Nebraska now, as well as another population in North Dakota. So perhaps hunting has helped establish some of those populations. The take is still the same in the Black Hills, so it seems to be set at a level that is manageable. They're not harming the population. Cougars still seem to be dispersing, which puts up a number of challenges for state agencies that are trying to manage cougars.
So that really is the bottom line here, that mountain lions or cougars are abundant in these areas and will continue to be so for quite some time.
Yeah, that's the future. How will cougar populations fare into the future? What's going to be their ultimate distribution in North America? How will we justify the possibility of the public coming into contact with cougar populations or cougar individuals, knowing that there have been some negative connotations associated with large predators? Is there going to be a place for large predators in the Midwest? Those are all very important questions that I think state agencies are going to have to wrestle with here in the very near future.
Well, this research providing an enlightening look at the expanding range of cougars or mountain lions, and of course there have been confirmations here in Kansas as well as other locations. Charlie, thanks for the report on this. He is a wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. And that caps off today's edition. Many thanks to you for being along with us. And please rejoin us right here this same time tomorrow. Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.